I never liked corporate parties. There's something fake about them, the tight smiles, the forced laughter, the way everyone's just slightly more charming than usual because the VP might be nearby. But that night in Austin, I went anyway. For Amber. She'd been excited about it for weeks. Picked out her dress a full month in advance. Spent too long debating between silver heels and black ones. Told me her team had really turned a corner this quarter. And that I'd finally get to meet her boss. The one she couldn't stop talking about lately, Connor. Connor this, Connor that. Connor thinks I'm ready for a leadership role. Connor says I'm too talented to be overlooked. Connor took the team out for drinks after work again. Can you believe that? The name had already started to taste bitter by the time I shook his hand. He was younger than I expected, probably mid-30s, fit, good-looking in that smug, know-it kind of way. The type of guy who wears a blazer with jeans and gets away with it. He clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends and told me he hears great things about Amber. I smiled, nodded, said all the polite things. But the way he said her name, low and slow like he owned it, that stuck with me. Later, I was getting us drinks and saw them standing at the bar. She didn't see me yet, so I watched for a moment. Just a moment. He was saying something close to her ear, and she laughed. This soft kind of laugh I hadn't heard in a while. Her eyes sparkled, but not in a way I recognized. Then it happened. Her hand reached out and met his on the counter. A brush at first, then it stayed. Fingers lightly resting against his. Not accidental. Not innocent. Familiar. My stomach dropped. I walked over, forcing a smile, and her whole body stiffened for half a second before she turned and kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong. "There you are," she said, too cheerful. "Connor was just telling me about the new leadership initiative. He thinks I should apply." "Yeah." I looked at her hand, now carefully pulled away from his. "Sounds like a big opportunity." Connor grinned, raised his glass like a toast. "She's a star. You're a lucky guy." "Lucky." Amber wrapped an arm around me, tight, almost like a performance, and leaned into me as if to prove something. But her body was tense. She wasn't really touching me, just putting on a show. For the rest of the evening, she kept it up. Introduced me to everyone, praised me like I was some kind of hero. "Logan's the one who keeps me sane," she'd say, or "You should see him cook. He's amazing in the kitchen." Loud. Too loud. Overcompensating. But her eyes never settled on me. Every time she scanned the room, I caught her glancing back toward the bar. Toward him. We stayed for a couple more hours. I kept the drinks coming. Not because I needed to be drunk, but because I couldn't stand being completely sober and watching my wife pretend. I laughed where I was supposed to. Made small talk with strangers. Nodded politely when coworkers told me how hardworking Amber was and how late she stays sometimes. I bet she does. We left around 11. The music had gotten too loud and the energy too wild. Amber clung to my arm like nothing was wrong. But her grip loosened when we hit the parking garage. Like she forgot she was supposed to still be pretending. In the car, she talked a lot at first. About the venue, the food, how she didn't really like champagne but drank it anyway. I nodded, gave her half answers. My mind was still at the bar, watching that small, electric touch between her and Connor. She must have noticed something was off because she eventually stopped talking. We drove the rest of the way in silence. At home, she went straight to the bathroom to take off her makeup. I stood in the kitchen staring at nothing. Then I remembered her purse. She'd asked me earlier in the night if I could grab it from the coat check while she was chatting with some coworkers. I hadn't looked in it then, but now something made me pick it up. I don't know what I expected to find. I wasn't even looking for anything, really, just drawn to it, like maybe some part of me already knew. Inside was the usual stuff: lipstick, breath mints, receipts. And then, tucked in the inside zipper pocket, I found a folded piece of paper. It was small and creased like it had been opened and closed more than once. I opened it. "See you tomorrow, beautiful." No name, no initials, just that. I stood there holding it for a while. I don't even know how long. Long enough for her to walk back into the room, now in an old t-shirt and leggings, wiping her face with a towel. "What's that?" she asked casually, when she saw the paper in my hand. I held it up. Found this in your purse. She paused. Just a second too long. Oh, she said, then let out a small laugh. That? It's just a dumb joke. The girls at work were teasing me about being married and getting hit on. I think Mia wrote that. Mia? I repeated, staring at her. She nodded quickly. Yeah, it was like this whole inside joke about how I'm the married girl who still gets notes. Stupid, really? I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in her voice, in the way she didn't look me in the eye when she said it, made it impossible. It was like she was reading from a script she hadn't rehearsed enough. You keep stuff like that? I asked. What? If it's a joke, why keep it? She blinked. I don't know. I didn't even realize it was still in there. I nodded and put the note back in her purse. She smiled, too quickly, and walked past me into the living room. "Wanna watch something?" she called out. I stood in the kitchen a little longer, watching her flop onto the couch and scroll through her phone like everything was normal. Like we hadn't just crossed a line we couldn't uncross. That was the first crack. Not the earthquake, not yet. But it was enough. And I knew, in the pit of my stomach, that whatever was happening between them, it didn't start tonight. This had been going on. And I'd been blind. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling while Amber snored softly beside me, wrapped up in the sheets like she hadn't just torn a hole through the middle of our marriage. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that note again. See you tomorrow, beautiful. The words looped in my head like a song stuck on repeat. The kind that slowly drives you insane. At first, I tried to convince myself it didn't mean anything. That maybe she was telling the truth. Maybe it was just some inside joke between her and her girlfriends. But that didn't explain the way she froze when I showed it to her. It didn't explain the way she kept looking over her shoulder at the party. And it damn sure didn't explain the way her hand had lingered on Connor's like it belonged there. By morning, I stopped trying to make excuses for her. Amber was already up by the time I came downstairs. She was in the kitchen, humming to herself while pouring coffee like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek, asked if I wanted toast, then launched into a rundown of her meetings for the day. I nodded along, numb, pretending to listen. It was all performance. I could feel it in my bones. Every smile, every casual touch, rehearsed, like she was trying to paper over a crack in the wall with cheerful small talk. When she left for work, I stood at the front window and watched her car disappear down the street. I felt like a ghost inside my own house. The place was too quiet, too clean, and for the first time in a long time, I noticed how separate our lives had become. Things had been off for months. I just hadn't wanted to see it. She used to leave her phone lying around, screen up on the table or kitchen counter. But lately it was always on silent and face down, or tucked in her bag. She never left it unattended anymore, not even when she showered. And if I so much as glanced at it while it lit up, she'd turn it over without a word. Her schedule changed too. She started leaving earlier for work, said she needed to beat traffic or grab coffee before her meetings. Then she started staying later. The team's pushing hard, she'd say. Connor's trusting me with more responsibility. Connor. Always Connor. I didn't realize how often she brought him up until I started listening for it. Little mentions here and there. Connor said I should lead this one, or Connor wants to schedule a strategy lunch. It wasn't always direct praise. Sometimes it was just casual. Connor and I ran into the CFO, or Connor told the funniest story about. Stop. Even the way she said his name was different, like it belonged on her tongue. The changes weren't just logistical. It was her. The way she moved. The way she smiled. She'd changed her perfume recently. Something sharper, bolder. Not the soft vanilla scent I loved, but something heady and mature. It didn't smell like amber. It smelled like someone trying to reinvent themselves, or trying to impress someone else. At night, she was distant. We used to curl up on the couch after dinner, watch movies, talk about our days. Now, she'd sit on the far end with her laptop open and a glass of wine in her hand. Always typing. Always laughing softly at messages I wasn't allowed to see. If I asked what was funny, She'd just say work stuff or group chat nonsense. And meals? Those disappeared too. She started skipping dinner altogether. I'm not hungry, she'd say. I had a big lunch. Sometimes she'd reheat something hours later, eat standing up in the kitchen like a stranger in her own home. The warmth she used to greet me with, the smile, the hug, the way her eyes lit up when I walked through the door, all of it was gone, replaced by a dull nod or a distracted "Hey babe" from across the room, like I was a background character in her life. And the worst part? I started believing it was my fault. I convinced myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid, that maybe I was just projecting my own stress from work onto her. I even Googled how to rebuild trust when you're overthinking, like I was the problem. But then there was that night, a couple of weeks before the party, when I caught a message pop up on her phone. She was in the bathroom brushing her teeth, and her phone lit up on the nightstand. I wasn't trying to snoop. I swear I wasn't. It was muscle memory. I glanced at the screen. The name that popped up wasn't one I recognized. Jay. Just that. No last name. No photo. The message preview said, "Still thinking about last night." I froze. Before I could even reach for the phone, she walked out and grabbed it off the table like it was on fire, pressed the lock button, slipped it into her pocket without saying a word. Then she turned to me and smiled, like nothing happened. When I asked who Jay was, she laughed, said it was someone from accounting who made weird jokes after work. "He's harmless," she said. Kind of annoying, honestly. I bought that lie. I wanted to. But now, with everything else, that moment felt different. It didn't feel harmless anymore. It felt like the tip of something bigger. Something hidden. I started noticing how she avoided talking about her day. Used to be, she'd tell me everything. Who she met, what went wrong, how many cups of coffee she had. Now, if I asked, I'd get one-word answers. Fine. Busy. Nothing new. If I pressed, her mood shifted. She'd get quiet, defensive. Or worse, she'd go cold. Shut down like she was retreating into some mental bunker I wasn't allowed inside. One night, I came home late from work and found her sitting on the back patio in the dark, just staring at the sky with a blanket wrapped around her. I sat beside her and asked if she was okay. She didn't answer right away. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, "Do you ever feel like you're fading into someone else's life?" I didn't know how to respond. I wanted to say no, that I was still right here, that nothing had changed. But the truth was, everything had. That was the night I knew I was losing her. It wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet, gradual, like watching a candle burn down to nothing and not realizing how dark the room had gotten until you couldn't see your own hands anymore. I started second-guessing everything. Every smile, every text, every delayed reply, every time she got dressed up to grab coffee with a coworker. She said she was just networking. Everyone's doing it now. But I saw the way she looked in the mirror before she left, like she was checking herself for someone else's eyes. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I kept smiling, kept pretending, played the part of the supportive husband. I kissed her goodnight, told her to drive safe, asked how her meetings went, knowing I'd never get a real answer. But inside, I was unraveling. There's something cruel about watching someone you love disappear right in front of you. Knowing they're still there. Same laugh, same freckles, same favorite mug in the dishwasher. But feeling like a stranger lives behind their eyes. I was holding on to shadows. And every day, they slipped further through my fingers. I didn't plan it. I didn't wake up that morning thinking, "Today's the day I confirm my wife is cheating on me." But sometimes your body moves before your mind catches up. That's what it felt like when I found myself driving to her office the next day, hands gripping the wheel tighter than they needed to, stomach in knots that hadn't untangled since the party in Austin. Amber had texted that morning saying she forgot her wallet and asked if I could drop it off. Said she was slammed with meetings and wouldn't get a break. I told her I'd bring it. She didn't argue. I pulled into the parking lot of her downtown office tower around noon. It was the kind of building with too much glass and too little soul, all cold edges and polished lies. Her firm occupied the 14th floor. I'd been there before once, for a holiday event. Back when I still believed her coworkers were just that, coworkers. Inside, the receptionist gave me a cheerful smile as I walked up with the wallet. "Here to see Amber?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "She left this at home. Can I drop it off on her desk?" "She's actually in a meeting right now," the woman replied, her voice lowering like she was sharing a secret. "Conference room 2. I can take it if you'd like." I don't know what made me say it. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the simmering doubt that had been cooking just beneath my skin. "Actually," I said, faking a laugh, "I should probably make sure it's really hers. Last time I returned her wallet, it was her coworker's. I'll just be quick." The receptionist hesitated but eventually nodded. "It's just down the hall, second door on the left." I thanked her and walked slowly toward the glass-walled conference room. I saw them before they saw me. Amber was sitting on Connor's lap. Not next to him. Not across from him. On his lap. Her arms draped over his shoulders like she belonged there. Her head tilted back in laughter. A half-full glass of champagne in one hand, her other gently tracing the back of his neck, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. He whispered something in her ear, and she smiled, wide and easy. It wasn't passion. It wasn't heat. It was comfort. Routine. I didn't move. Couldn't. My body just froze outside the room while my mind screamed that this couldn't be real. That I wasn't actually seeing my wife smoothing the collar of another man's shirt like a wife sending her husband off to work. No shame. No secrecy. Just her and him in a room with blinds half-drawn and doors unlocked. I stood there long enough to see her straighten his tie. Then I turned around and walked back toward the lobby. At the front desk, I set her wallet on the counter, pulled out a pen from the Take One cup next to the receptionist's keyboard, and scribbled 4 words on a sticky note. "Don't look for me." I stuck it to the leather and left. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't wait for her meeting to end. Didn't answer the text that came in 20 minutes later. First asking where I'd gone, then if I was mad, then asking if I was okay. I didn't answer because I wasn't okay, and she already knew that. I drove for hours after that. Just anywhere. Couldn't go home. Not yet. Not to that bed we shared or the couch where she'd fallen asleep with her head in my lap while texting him under a blanket. I couldn't stand to be near anything that had once made me feel safe, because now it all felt poisoned. I pulled over at a rest stop off I-35, turned off my phone, and just sat there, staring out the windshield, watching the world pass by, thinking about all the little details I had ignored. The perfume that wasn't mine, the nights she worked late, the way her eyes darted whenever Connor's name came up, all the lies dressed as laughter, all the fake affection in public that felt more like deflection than love. Somewhere between Austin and the empty road stretching ahead, I realized something that hurt more than what I saw. She wasn't hiding it anymore. At the party, she let me see the closeness. Let me feel the awkward tension between them. Let me find that note in her bag. And now, at her office, she didn't even close the blinds. She wasn't covering it up. She was done pretending. I stayed on that road until the sky turned from gold to gray, then gray to black. When I finally got back home, the porch light was on and the living room window glowed like an old memory. I almost didn't go in, but I did. I stepped inside quietly. The house felt hollow, like the air had been pulled out of it, like it knew something was missing or about to be. I went upstairs, packed a small duffel bag, essentials, some clothes, my passport, the charger I always forget. I didn't take anything that belonged to us, just what was mine, what was still untouched. Amber wasn't home yet, or maybe she was. Maybe she was sitting somewhere with him, drinking champagne again, brushing off the moment I'd walked out. Before I left, I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Just sat there, my keys on the table, my wedding ring next to them. I stared at it for a long time. That thin circle of metal had felt like armor once, a shield against the world. But now, it just felt like a lie I kept wearing. So I left it there, right next to the copy of her wallet I'd found while packing, the spare one she used for work lunches, the one that had 2 receipts in it. One from a hotel bar in San Antonio dated 3 weeks ago. The other, a jewelry store. Her name wasn't on that receipt. His was. When I finally walked out the door, I didn't slam it. Didn't lock it behind me. Didn't leave a note. I figured the one on her wallet said enough. I didn't go far. Just far enough. About 30 miles out of town, tucked behind a line of cedar trees and a winding gravel road, there was a lake house I'd found online a few years back. Back then, I imagined renting it for a weekend getaway. Something quiet and romantic. A surprise for Amber after a long work quarter. Funny how things turn out. Now it was just me and the sound of the trees swaying against the roof. I paid for a month up front. The landlord didn't ask questions. I told him I needed space to write. He nodded, handed me the keys, and said the water pressure was temperamental but the sunsets were unbeatable. He was right about the sunsets. Every evening, the sky bled orange and purple over the lake. The stillness of it made me feel both incredibly small and strangely okay. The first night, I sat on the back porch wrapped in an old flannel blanket I'd grabbed from the house. My phone buzzed so many times I had to turn it off. I couldn't bring myself to read the messages. I knew they were from her. Amber wasn't the kind of person to sit in uncertainty. She thrived on clarity, on answers. She couldn't stand silence. And now it was all I gave her. By the second day, the silence turned into something solid. Like air I could touch. Thick, heavy, but oddly calming. No TV. No music. No voices. Just the hum of the fridge and the occasional cry of a loon across the lake. It was peaceful, but not gentle. Peace like this doesn't come soft. Cuts first, deep. I kept seeing her face. Not the one I'd fallen in love with, but the one from the conference room. The one that laughed in another man's lap. I replayed that moment more times than I care to admit. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I couldn't believe I'd missed it for so long. The first voicemail came that night. "Logan, I don't know where you are. Please call me. Please." I didn't. The second one was longer. More desperate. "You're scaring me. Just tell me you're okay. You don't have to talk. Just let me know." The third was angry. "I can't believe you just left like that. Do you even care about us?" Then back to begging. Then silence. It was a pattern. Calls. Voicemails. Then texts. Some were frantic, others eerily composed. Like she was trying on different versions of herself to see which one might bring me back. None of them worked. I didn't block her. That felt too final. Too angry. But I muted every notification. I needed to sit in this. I needed to feel it. The loss, the betrayal, the freefall. I didn't want distractions. Not hers. Not anyone's. On the fifth day, I stood in front of the mirror in the guest bathroom and didn't recognize the man staring back. Unshaven. Eyes bruised from sleep deprivation. Mouth drawn tight like it forgot how to smile. I touched the glass. Not dramatically, just to make sure I was still real. Then I started to breathe again. I cleaned the place. Swept the porch. Washed dishes I hadn't used. I needed order even if it was pointless. I made lists. Groceries. Repairs. Books I wanted to read. People I might eventually call. It felt like building scaffolding around a hollow frame. But I kept at it. Amber called again that night. I let it ring out. Then she texted. "I'm sorry. Please, Logan. I miss you." I put the phone face down and walked outside. The wind had picked up. Leaves spiraled down from the trees, piling at the edge of the dock. I walked to the end of it and sat with my legs dangling just above the water. I remembered when we used to talk about buying a place like this. Back when we were younger and stupid enough to believe in forever. She wanted a swing on the porch. I wanted a grill and a canoe. We both wanted space. Just enough distance to hear ourselves think, she used to say. Now I had it. All the distance in the world. I didn't sleep much that night. The wind howled through the rafters and knocked something loose in the attic. I stayed curled under the blanket, staring at the ceiling, trying not to picture her with him. I failed. But the next morning I didn't think about it as much. Just enough to remember. Not enough to ruin me. I started waking up earlier. walking to the shore with a mug of black coffee and letting the cold air hit my face. I didn't rush the day, didn't check the time, didn't care if it rained. For the first time in a long time, no one expected anything from me. That's what healing felt like. Not loud, not sudden, quiet, slow, relentless. By the second week, the calls slowed. The texts came every other day. Then every few days. They got shorter. Are you okay? Please just talk to me. I didn't mean for this to happen. And then, one night, I miss who we were. I stared at that one for a while. Thought about replying. Almost did. But who we were didn't exist anymore. She'd burned that version of us to the ground. All that was left was smoke and memory. I turned off my phone and went back to reading. The silence stayed with me. It didn't haunt me anymore. It held me. I started shaving again on day 17. Not because I had anywhere to go or anyone to impress, but because I wanted to recognize the man in the mirror again. It was one of those quiet mornings. Cold enough for a hoodie, too warm for a fire. I made coffee without checking my phone. I didn't need to anymore. I knew it would be there, vibrating silently with messages I had no interest in reading. Amber had gone from pleading to philosophical. Her latest text, 2 days ago, read, "I understand why you left, but please understand why I stayed." I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't care enough to decode it. The lake house had become something sacred. Not because it was perfect. The place smelled like old wood and wet leaves, and the plumbing groaned like a dying animal, but because it was mine. A space without shared memories. No wedding photos. No reminders of her perfume clinging to pillowcases. Just stillness. And in that stillness, I started to remember who I was. Before her. Before us. I pulled out an old leather journal I hadn't touched in years. The pages were yellowed. The spine cracked from being tossed in drawers and forgotten under bills. I used to write every morning. Thoughts, goals, the random junk that floats through your head when the world's still quiet. So I started again. 1 sentence a day. I'm still here. I miss who I used to be. I'm afraid I was always alone. Then later, I like this silence. I'm not angry today. I made good coffee. Small things. Honest things. There's a kind of therapy in your own handwriting. It doesn't let you lie to yourself. Not like a conversation can. It shows you who you are without asking for permission. I cooked simple meals. Eggs. Toast. Canned soup with way too much hot sauce. I read books I hadn't touched in years. Dog-eared novels I once loved and had almost forgotten. I walked for hours without purpose. No music, no podcasts. Just the crunch of gravel under my boots and the occasional burst of wind through the trees. And I thought a lot about forgiveness. Not hers. Mine. Forgiving myself for believing the version of us that never really existed. For missing the signs. For working so hard to keep something alive that had already started to rot at the edges. I had become an expert at rationalizing. She's just tired. She's under pressure. She's still figuring things out. But now, in the echo of her absence, it all felt like I'd been gaslighting myself. There's this question that had been eating at me since I walked away. Was she always this person? Or did I turn her into someone she didn't recognize? The truth is, I don't know. Maybe it's both. Maybe neither. Maybe that answer doesn't belong to me. What I do know is this. Love doesn't live in secrecy. It doesn't survive on half-truths and text messages that get hidden when someone walks into the room. Love shows up. It looks you in the eye and says, "This is me," even when it's hard. Amber stopped showing up a long time ago. One afternoon, I drove into town for groceries. Nothing dramatic, just eggs, coffee, toothpaste, and something green to prove to myself I wasn't entirely feral. The woman behind the counter asked if I was new in the area. I told her I was passing through. She smiled and said, "You look like someone who needed to get away." I didn't ask what that meant. I already knew. When I got back, I found a letter in the mailbox at the end of the dirt road. No return address. Just my name in her handwriting. I carried it back to the house, unopened, set it on the table, and stared at it for the rest of the night. It wasn't fear that kept me from reading it. It was certainty. I already knew what was inside, some blend of apology and self-reflection. Maybe she said she missed me. Maybe she confessed more. Maybe she talked about her childhood and how she never learned how to be loved properly. It didn't matter. I went to bed without touching it. The next morning, I burned it in the fireplace. I watched the edges curl and blacken until her words turned to ash. It felt symbolic, even if it was petty. I told myself it was for closure, but I knew better. I wasn't angry anymore, just finished. That was the morning I looked at my wedding ring, the one I'd stopped wearing the day I walked out, and decided not to keep it anymore. I didn't throw it in the lake. That would have been too cinematic. Instead, I placed it in the glove box of my truck. A symbol, maybe, or just a reminder of everything I'd survived. I didn't need to wear it, but I wasn't ready to pretend it hadn't existed either. Not yet. I made a list that day. Not a grocery list. Not a things-to-do list. A list of everything I had forgotten about myself. I like storms, the kind that shake the windows. I used to sing in the car. I laugh at dumb sitcoms when no one's around. I miss my brother. I should call him. I don't need someone to feel whole. That last one hit the hardest. I had spent years convincing myself that Amber was the glue that held my life together. But now, stripped of that illusion, I realized she'd been the distraction from the things I needed to face. My own silence, my own doubts, my own voice, and for the first time in forever, I wanted to hear it again. So I wrote more, walked longer, started sketching again badly, little pencil outlines of trees and birds and the way the lake looked at sunset. I found joy in small, stupid things. The sound of coffee dripping, the smell of clean laundry, the way the moonlight hit the dock at 2 a.m. I didn't think about her every minute anymore, and when I did, it didn't cut quite as deep. That was progress. That was healing. Amber showed up at the lake house unannounced, in a dress too expensive for apologies. She held her wedding ring like a lifeline and said she finally understood what she'd lost. I listened in silence, no anger left, only distance. When she finished, I poured her a cup of coffee, set it gently on the table, and walked outside. She stayed seated, staring at the steam, at a version of us that no longer existed. A month later, I sat alone at a roadside cafe, watching rain blur the city into watercolor. At the next table, her old boss laughed with someone new. Just another repeat. Amber was no longer with him. She was always chasing something shinier. On my truck seat lay a note I'd once left her. "Don't look for me." I kept it as a reminder, not of her, but of the moment I chose peace over noise, and walked back into my own life.